Hello everyone and welcome to episode 9 of my Python tutorial series. Today we are finally going to tackle a significant project. This entire video is just going to be one project. That project is going to be, of course, a text read aloud script that will allow you to pick what sentence you want to start on in a certain body of text and then speak out the rest of the contents. Alright, now before we start coding, we actually need to make a new folder. This is very important for this project because we are going to be reading files from the folder. So in this folder, let's make sure we have two files. The first one, of course, is our Python file. So I will name mine autoreader.py. And then we also need a new text document. And I'm going to name mine read.txt. I recommend you name yours the same. Now, in this text file, we need to put a few sentences. Now, I'm just going to take from one of my favorite books, that being The Hobbit, and I'm going to paste the first few paragraphs of The Hobbit in here. It doesn't really matter what text you use as long as it has solid English sentences and there aren't weird characters like Arabian characters or emoji. But as long as you have that, we are ready to start coding. The first thing we need to do, of course, is import our modules. Now we want to do two major actions in this code. We want to read the file and we want the Python script to speak the file out loud. Now Python can already read text files just fine, but it cannot speak. So let's import our module that we downloaded last video, which is pyttsx3. This will allow it to speak. And now let's make some variables. Now before we make the variables, let's talk about comments. If you ever put a hashtag symbol anywhere in code, it will basically say all of the words on the right of this. The code will just completely skip them and not read it. So if I say hello world right here, usually that would just break the code, right? Because this is not proper Python. You need to put it in a string or something. But because it's in a comment, the code will completely skip it. It is just for you to read. We are going to use these comments to keep track of all the code so that way you can know what we're doing. Now there are two variables we need to make right off the bat. The first one is a variable to store the entire text file. And the second one is to store the entire text file, but store the sentences in different parts of an array. So we can say, hey, speak sentence 2 and 3, but don't speak sentence 1. That's our goal. So let's make those variables. The first one I'll make is text contents. And I will equal this to none because we don't have the text file open yet. So I will just set it to a blank variable right now. Make sure you do capital N none. And then I will add a comment with shift 3 to make a hashtag. And I will say this variable will store the text file contents. And remember, these comments will not affect the code. If you write your comment differently, it will not affect the code at all. It is just for you to remember what this variable is going to do. And now down here, I'm going to say split content equals brackets. Now this is going to be our array. Remember, an array can store multiple different variables. So what we are going to do is we are going to have each variable in split contents be a different sentence. So whenever we want the text to read something, we can tell it, hey, just read this sentence, not the entire text file. So I will say here, hashtag this variable stores all sentences in an array. Okay, we now have our variables. The next step is to actually open the text file so we can read it, of course. So let's do with open, just like before. And then in here, we'll say read.txt because that was the name of my read file. If you named yours differently, make sure to write in the correct name. And then in here, let's do R. R is for read, of course. And now we have our read file, but we need to set it to a variable so we can mess around with it. So I will say as text file. And now remember in here, if we try to print text file, it will print the object of the text file. It will not print the text. We want to print the text. So what we need to do is be messing with textfile.read because textfile.read is where we actually get the text from. So here we want to set our text contents variable to the text file's read content. So here let's go into the with open by tabbing in and enter text contents equals text file dot read. Now it will read the entire file and set text contents to that variable. Now it will read all of the text from the file and put it into our variable text contents. And we can even see that if we try to print it. If we print text contents, we will see that it prints all of the text. Okay, now we have our normal variable, but we still need to set up our split contents variable. That one's crucial. So first, we don't need to do this in the with open loop anymore, because the text contents already has all the text file information. We don't need this text file open anymore. So down here, outside of the with open, let's type split contents equals text contents. Now here's what gets really cool. Now we can split all of the text that we just got into an array simply by using dot split and then put parentheses, and now we need to tell it where we want to split these sentences. Basically think of all of our text like a super long vegetable, and we need to tell the code where to cut the vegetable at. We want to cut it into sentence-sized pieces. So let's tell it to cut, in quotation marks, at a period. Now this will cut the sentence wherever there is a period. Now to show you what that looks like, let's start messing around with the split contents variable. So theoretically, if this all worked, what we should have is split contents be an array that is entirely filled with separate sentences. So let's say print split contents. Now if I run this, we will see that in the array, the first variable is in a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. And then we'll see that the next sentence is the next piece of the array. And then the next array piece is the next sentence, etc. So we have just split up this text file into a whole bunch of different pieces of an array. And each piece in this array is one sentence. So if we wanted to print just the first sentence, we can go into here, put some brackets, and put a 0 inside. And now when we run it, it will print the first sentence. And then if we want to print the next one, we can say print 1. And now it prints the second sentence. See that? So this is super cool. We now have all of the sentences in a format that we can mess around with. Now, in fact, that idea is what we are going to be building on right now. What the goal of this next section is to just print all of the sentences in the list. So of course, to do that, we need a for loop. So I will say for sentence in split contents. Now remember, this is going to make a loop that is like a while true loop, but every time it runs, sentence will be changed. So the first time we run it, it will be the first sentence. The second time we run it, it will be the second sentence, etc. So in here, let's just say print sentence. So it should take our split contents, which is an array of all of our sentences, and it should take the first one and print it. And then after printing the first sentence, it'll restart and print the second sentence, and so on until all of the sentences have been printed. So let's run this, and we see that that is exactly what happens. It prints the first sentence, and then it prints the second sentence, and then it prints the third sentence, etc. So this is working perfectly. However, remember, we don't just want to print it, we want to actually speak the words out loud. Now, if you remember before, we used an engine to do that. So let's make that happen. Down here, I will say engine equals pyttsx3 dot init. And this will make our engine. And then let's make our engine say something. So we'll say engine dot say. And then we'll have it say the sentence. And then down here, let's do engine dot run and wait. And then finally, let's delete the engine, because remember, as soon as this code is done, it's going to go back up to the top and restart. And when it restarts, it needs a fresh new engine. So we need to delete the old engine, just like we learned last episode. Now here, let's run the code.
In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit.
Look at that.
Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to
So we are now getting this program to speak out all of the sentences, which is awesome. We already have a lot of the work done, but we are not done yet because we still need to let the user pick where they start. That is going to be our next project. What we want to do is not just have it say the entire text, which that is useful. Let's say you have a text file that is 400 sentences, and let's say you wanted to start on sentence 300. You do not want to have to wait through all 300 sentences before just to get to the spot that you want to be at. So the next piece of this project is to make it to where we can allow the user to pick which sentence they start at. So first of all, we want to do this after we get the text so we know how many sentences there are, but we also want to put it before it actually starts talking. So I'm going to put mine right here. Now in here, let's say starting sentence equals input. And then in here, I'll type, what sentence would you like to start at? And now when we run the code, It should ask us for what sentence we should start at, and we could type something like 3, and then once we make the code work,
In a hole in the
it
ground
should
there
make
lived
it
a
start at
hobbit.
that sentence. Now we have the variable, but remember, when we input something, it inputs as a string. So even though I would type the number 4 here, it's going to be quotation mark 4. It's not going to be the number 4. So before we do anything, let's fix that. Now first, before we turn it into a number, we need to make sure it is a number. So if we go here and run it, and I type potato, the code is just going to explode. If we try to start at potato sentence, that's not a sentence. We need to start at sentence 1 or sentence 2, etc. So let's check if starting sentence. Now we actually have a really handy function we can use here. We can do starting sentence dot is digit. So now if it is a whole number, let's say starting sentence equals integer version of starting sentence. So now if the variable we input is a digit, then it will convert the variable from string to number form. Now we can actually do something with it. Well, let's say somebody typed in something like flower. That's not going to work. So let's say otherwise, if it's not a digit, we'll say print that is not a valid digit. Now if I run the code and I say think, then it will say that is not a valid digit. So it's working. So now that we have that code, there's quite a bit of code on screen right now. So let's just split this up and make this look nice. First thing I'm going to do is say, up here, this entire section of code is to check which sentence we start at. So I'm going to type here, asks player for sentence number to start at. So this code does that. And now down here, I'll write prints and says sentences. So now our code is split into 3 areas. We have the setup, we have the part where you ask for which sentence you start on, and we have the part where it actually says the sentences out loud. So right now, if we run the code, what's going to happen is it's going to ask for a digit. But the digit actually doesn't do anything yet. We need to tell the code down here which sentence to start at. So right here, it says for sentence in split contents, and we can tell it which sentence to start on. So if you remember, if we do brackets, we can say like start on sentence 0, or start on sentence 1, or start on sentence 4, etc. But instead of doing that, we want to input the number that we just got from the player. So I will say for sentence in split contents and start at the sentence that we're given. So I'll write starting sentence. And now this tells the code to start at starting sentence, but we also wanted to keep doing the rest of the sentences, not just the sentence we told it to start at. And to do that, we simply add a colon here. Not a semicolon, just a colon. So I'm going to try this now. Now remember, when we run this code, it says, what sentence would you like to start at? Remember, 0 is the first sentence. 1 is the second sentence. So if I want to start at sentence 4, I'm actually going to type in 3 here. We can fix that later on to make it more intuitive to the user, but right now that is how it works, because we are using an array. So I'm going to type 3, and it should start at the 4th sentence. Let's see.
The door opened onto
And look at that, it started on sentence 4, just like I wanted it to. Now we have code that will start at a sentence that we want it to, which is great, but we still have a lot of issues. Technically, this code works. However, it's really, really bad to use, right? Like, if I try to run this, and I say, start at sentence grapefruit, it's just going to explode. It doesn't work. It doesn't know how to start at sentence grapefruit. It just tells us that it's wrong, but it doesn't actually stop the code from running. In addition, we have no idea how many sentences that are actually present in this file, and there is nothing stopping us from typing a sentence that is way outside of the range, like sentence 1000. That will still work. So we need to fix a whole bunch of stuff with this code to make it much better. But first, let's start with the simple stuff. And that is making it where the code will only run if you entered a valid number. So all we're going to do is take all of this code and put it in a while true loop, and basically just tell it, hey, keep on running this code until the player gives you a real number that we can use. So up here, let's do while true, and then select all of your code and hit tab to tab it in, or you can do tab manually. And now I'm going to put a little bit of a break through here, so that way it's easy to read. And now this code will run forever. Remember, we're in a while true loop. So if I run this, it'll ask you for a number, so I can say start at sentence 3. Then it'll ask again, I'll type 6, and it'll ask again. And it's not letting me go. Even if I type a bad thing like hats, it still asks again. We wanted to continue on through the code only if you have a valid number. So in this if loop that checks if the number is valid, then let's say break. And all break does is it stops the while true loop from happening. So this will just break out of the while true loop and move on to our next piece of code. So if I run this, it says, what sentence would you like to start at? If I type corgis, it doesn't work. If I type hammerfish, it doesn't work. But if I type 2, then it works.
Like a shiny yellow brass knob in.
Because now that I type 2, this if condition is true because the input I entered is a digit. And so it sets the starting digit to the integer format, and then it breaks the while true loop. Now, when it breaks out of the while true loop, let's just say print starting TTS, just so the user knows that the text is about to start. Okay, next problem. We have no idea how many sentences there are. Let's tell the user how many there are so he knows where he should start at. And so in the while true loop, above the input, because we wanted to tell you how many sentences there are before you choose which sentence to start at, obviously. So let's go up here and type print, and then I'll say there are, and then I'll put a space, and then plus, and then now we need to put how many sentences there are. And remember, split contents is the array that stores all the sentences. So we just need to get the length of split contents. Now, if you remember, in order to do that, all we have to do is type len for length, and then inside of parentheses, we type split contents. Now it will output the length of the split contents. But remember, we're still not done. Length is a number, and we need it to be a string. So we need to stringify it with str and use parentheses around the entire split contents and length. So this is what it should look like. Now it'll say how many sentences there are. So for example, if there are 4 sentences, it'll say there are 4. And now I'll just do a plus and then say sentences in this file. Now if I run it, it says there are 8 sentences in this file. Now I missed a space in between 8 and sentences, so let me go back and fix that. I will put a space right here. And now when I run it, it says there are 8 sentences in this file. Perfect. Now I can say, hey, I want to start at the last sentence. But wait, if I type 8, that's not going to work because the last sentence is the 8th sentence, but the array starts counting at 0. So the last sentence is actually 7. So we need to fix that next. So in here, let's say, okay, well, the user's going to type in 1 to start at the first sentence, but we actually want it to be 1 less. So if you type in 2, you should start on the second sentence, which is array index 1. If you want to start at sentence 5, then you'll type in 5, but that's actually array index 4. So all we have to do is subtract 1 from whatever the starting sentence is. So in our if statement, after we turn it into an integer, let's say starting sentence equals starting sentence minus 1. So now it will be 1 less. Now if I run the code, it'll say there are 8 sentences in the file. What sentence would you like to start at? Well, I would like to start at the last sentence, so I'm going to type in 8. Then when I type in 8, remember, it will subtract 1, so turn it into 7, and then tell the engine to start speaking at sentence 7, which is the 8th sentence. But nothing happens. So what happened? Well, what happened is we told it to start at sentence 8, and it actually said all of sentence 8. The issue arrives with how we split the contents. Let's check out our contents again. Before we do any of this code down here, let's go up here and say print split contents, and then let's print 5 first. So when I run it, it says 5. So that's a sentence. And then when I type 6, which will be the 7th sentence, I will run it, and it'll say that sentence. And now I'm going to go to the 7, which is going to be the 8th sentence. So this is what we said. When I run it, it's just a blank line. There's nothing there. And the reason why is because let's check out our text file. Remember, when we read this text file and split it into an array, it is going to split at every period. So there's a period here to say this is set to 0, And then there's a period here to say that all this is sentence 1, etc. So it will split all of these, and then it gets to this last period, and then it splits. Do you see the issue? It splits, which means all of this is going to be the 7th sentence, and then everything past the period is going to be the 8th sentence. But there's nothing past the period, which means we just printed absolutely nothing. It printed empty air. So we need to fix that. We have to get rid of empty array indexes, anything that doesn't actually have any text in it. And to do that, we are going to make a third variable up here. So instead of just having text contents and split contents, we're going to make a third one, and we're going to call it cleaned content. And this one will be an array, of course, just like before, and I'll add a note. This is going to store all of our sentences, but get rid of any empty sentences, like the one we had at the end. So I will say this variable stores all non-empty sentences in an array. Okay, now we need to actually set cleaned content to just non-empty sentences. So let's do down here, after we split the contents, let's now put all of the normal sentences into our cleaned contents variable, but not any of the empty sentences. So let's say for sentence in split contents, just like we've done before, it's just a for loop where every sentence will be the sentence variable. Let's say sentence equals sentence dot strip. Now what strip does is it gets rid of any spaces or random empty areas or new lines or tabs or anything like that. So any non-words at the end of a sentence, it'll get rid of. So now let's say we have a string that's just like this. It's just an empty sentence, right? It has nothing in it. What strip is going to do, it is going to delete that empty space. So now we just have an empty variable. So it's not even going to exist really. But if we have a variable like, I rode my bike to school today, then it has nothing to remove because there's no empty space at the end. But let's say that there's a space at the beginning here. If we strip it, then it will remove that extra space at the beginning. So stripping your content is just going to make it a lot cleaner. It's very useful and a very good thing to get into the habit of. So now that we've stripped our variables, let's say if sentence, so this just checks, hey, does the sentence even exist anymore? Does sentence.strip completely destroy it? Because if it did completely destroy it, then it was empty and we don't want to keep it. But if it still exists and it still has letters in it, then let's do cleaned contents dot append. And then in here, let's write sentence. So now if the sentence exists, then we're just going to add it to our cleaned contents variable. It might take you a second to understand it, but we've just made a new variable that got rid of all of the bad sentences, including that one that was giving us that trouble. So now we have our cleaned contents variable, but we need to modify all this code down here because it's still using split contents, not cleaned content. So let's make it to where it says there are, and then the length of cleaned content, not of split contents. Now if we run it, it'll say there are 7 sentences. See that? It got rid of the empty white space at the end. And then down here, we don't want it to say 4 sentences in split content because we're not going to read from split content. We're going to read from cleaned content. So now let's check it. It says there are 7 sentences in this file. Which would you like to start at? Let's start at 7. That should be the last sentence. If I hit enter,
The best rooms were all on the left-hand
look
side.
at that. It does the last sentence. Perfect. All right. Great job on finally completing our biggest project yet. Hopefully you learned a lot, and I hope this project comes in handy for you in the future. Give yourself a well-deserved break. I will see you in the next video.